Hi, everybody. Welcome to my series, The Long Story Short, Tidbits from a Chief of Staff. And today's guest, Katie Jackson, is a senior business program manager who specializes in communications and operations. Katie, welcome, 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 welcome.
Thank you, Emery. So happy to be with you always.
I'm happy to have you here. The topic that I wanted you to share with us is something that both of us have a desire to make sure that everybody's aware of, and that's effective allyship and why
Mm,
it's so important. So, Katie, tell us what you consider effective allyship. Like, define that for us.
a great question. I think effective allyship requires first and foremost some self-awareness of where I am coming from in terms of my privilege, my power, the barriers that I face, the biases that I face, and also three things: knowing when to speak up,
Mm-hmm.
knowing when to hold space, and above all, holding space for everyone wherever they are in their allyship journey. Some
Awesome.
people may never become allies, but we always have hope.
Right, right. So, in your allyship journey, tell me a little bit about what that's looked like for you. What are the things that you've learned, gleaned, whatever? Because you brought up three really effective points that I think there's got to be a story behind how you came up with those points.
I really raised myself up. I was someone who taught myself to read very at a very young age. Um, and I had the privilege of being the granddaughter of an English teacher who taught in the 60s. And I devoured everything on the shelves of my parents, of my
Wow.
grandparents. And a lot of that was reading of the time. And so I really started diving deep into Black and African American history as a young person.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm talking 8, 12, 18, and reading about other lived experiences as well. Of course, The Diary of Anne Frank,
Mm-hmm.
uh, reading about it was a time when Indigenous people were first starting to tell their own stories as well, in terms of not having stories filtered through religious organizations or representatives and all of that. So it was a real time of freedom. And I just, um, part of my drive to explore was really figuring out, as Maya Angelou says, I'm a human being, therefore nothing human is alien to me. And so
Right.
really reaching for that commonality
Mm-hmm.
and places where I've had hardship or suffering. It's even forgive the clumsy retelling of a Buddhist principle, but it's like me, this person has suffered. Not
Mm-hmm.
to make light of anything, but to notice what we might have in common, and then the unique differences that we may have given our lived experience. And so it just made me really curious about people. We
Right.
live in a world where people feel very comfortable loving animals, and I do too, but I also really love people. And I just have grown so much and continue to grow every day from listening and learning from people in my work, in my
Mm-hmm.
life, people I encounter in the world, in terms of when we are able to have a real conversation about some of the challenges and joys people are navigating.
Right. Wow. So, a little bit about this series. I am hoping to reach people who are either chief of staffs, aspiring chiefs of staffs, executives who work with chief of staffs. And one of the things about what you're talking about, allyship, or just understanding diversity and inclusivity, is so important in that role. And obviously, for you as a communications leader,
Mhm.
to emphasize, are there things that you think that folks should be aware of as they're navigating that, just how they can be effective allies? You've talked a little bit about your journey and helped us understand what effective allyship is. What are some things that you could share with folks so they could, um, want to be allies?
Mm. I think definitely pursuing ways to engage your team members, um, ways to, whether it be a diversity inclusion group within your team or
Mhm.
creating one, creating some kind of forum for listening and participation and creating space for people.
Right.
Sometimes it's an employee resource group or something like that. Um, but having some kind of feedback mechanism that is not dictating to, but really listening to what are some of the concerns. I often hear about, you know, people wanting to know what's happening with recruiting. How are we recruiting diverse employees?
Mm,
How are we growing? Looking at the leadership of our organization, what are we doing to grow
right.
diverse leaders within our organization and actively mentoring people? Really, I've had the privilege of being invited to mentor others, or and certainly pursuing mentors myself,
Mhm.
to help me continue to learn and grow and hear what's top of mind. I think it's very easy. Even I was listening to a podcast of Chef Jose Andres talking about
Mm,
going to Haiti, and
mhm,
he has this beautiful, incredible world kitchen, and he was talking about cooking the local foods, and he started to cook beans for people following some of the recent crises in Haiti, which I know you know well, Anne-Marie,
mhm.
and and someone said to him, that's not how we cook these. And he said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for telling me." So it's like here was this effort of good, and yet it was like that's not how we eat those things.
Right, right.
And so I think that's part of that nuance of good works also has to include that listening.
Nice. You know what I really liked about your story? And Jose Andres, he's amazing.
Truly,
Amazing. Is he's always open to learning. Because if
yes,
anybody looks at his pedigree, he is a very accomplished chef. And instead of going into a situation with this is what I know you need, he went with this attitude of I want to learn, I want to understand. And I think that's the theme that I've heard from
yeah,
every message that you've shared so far is you're walking into a
mm,
situation that you may be unfamiliar with,
mm-hmm.
but you want to understand and you approach it with the lens of I want to learn. How can I contribute? How can I be part of this journey? So we're walking it together and I'm not telling you the journey, but I want to walk this journey with you. I love that. That's just fantastic. I mean, I appreciate that that's what you're highlighting. Um
Yeah.
any parting words that you'd want to share with the audience on again your journey to be for me, I
Mhm.
consider you an ally for me. It
And
is
you for
part of
me, by the way, Anne Marie. I think it's mutual.
it's
I think,
very mutual.
and I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but I actually think that's real allyship, right?
Yeah.
Allyship
Yeah.
is not one way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
I it's a beautiful thing. And when individuals are able to embrace it almost symbiotically,
Mm-hmm.
it's the end result is amazing. So I wanted to give you a moment to give us one any parting remarks before I close this out. Anything you'd like to share?
Thank you for asking. I think I see people. I'm very active in a and do a lot of work in Indigenous
Hmm.
communities in my workplace, and something that I see people do it when they're early in their allyship, particularly when they don't know a lot about a culture, a group, the complexities of the cultures within that
Right.
group, um, is people tend to kind of stand back.
Hmm.
And I would say try to figure out how to get engaged and really roll your sleeves up and get into it. Whether
Um,
it's working side by side with people, um, there are always projects to do. How can you actually, here are my skills. Can you use me? Put me to work to help us be alongside one another so that we can learn together. I see people be timid and hold back, and then
mhm.
what to me that risks inadvertently leaning into performative allyship,
Mm-hmm.
because people are really observing, they're not learning. And it's kind
Right.
of breaking down, not holding people like we're conducting an anthropological study, not that there's anything wrong with that. But I continue to learn all the time, even as someone who studied since I raised myself up on so much Black and African American studies, I chose to lean into Indigenous studies in my university experience, which has just continues to be a joy for me. And what I have learned even in the last 6 months is how much the anthropological lens of my studies
Mm-hmm.
um, can color some of my awareness and my thinking. And
Oh.
and so it just has helped me, like having that illumination, having space for that growth
Mm-hmm.
has helped me continue to evolve my allyship. And
Wow.
so I think that's part of it, is that even if you think, well, yeah, I've learned a lot about this, that's great, but it's sort of, as the old saying goes, the more you know, the more you realize what you don't know.
Yep. Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
embracing that with a lot of joy and curiosity, and
I,
have
I
fun with it.
I appreciate that. And having fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
Having fun with it because there's a lot about it that can be difficult and
Yeah.
challenging, but it can also be enjoyable.
Yes.
So,
And what a privilege to, I always think, oh my gosh, I was talking with a friend recently who um, didn't understand what was an indigenous sense of humor, and I said, well, you're missing out, my friend. And that's the thing, is leaning into the joy of it. And I
yeah,
certainly have had the privilege of witnessing, that, and some cultures have, we hear the expression black joy. Well, it's a real thing.
right.
And if you like me, have been privileged to witness or maybe even participate as an ally in a moment of black joy, in a joyous event, I mean, there's nothing like it. So let's create more of it.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. Folks, I hope you were energized, excited, grab some things that you can do so you can be an effective ally and that you can enjoy this journey. And it just, embracing their journey. I love that you said that, Katie. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
going to close with. This is the long story short with Anne Marie. We talked about effective allyship, embrace the journey, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, folks.
Anne Marie, thank you.